Welcome to FSHD Straight Talk, the podcast where we dive deep into living with FSHD. I'm your host, Tim Hollenbach, and I'm on the journey with you. Having FSHD, I understand the challenges it brings to patients and their families. We're in this together, and this podcast is a space where we swap stories, share advice, and talk to experts to get the latest news. There's plenty to say about living with FSH muscular dystrophy, so let's get straight to it. Welcome all to the FSHD Society radio show. No. We're going nostalgic today. I bring that up only because our guest today is going to be June Kinoshita. This is FSHD Straight Talk. Back in the day, first episode was June Kinoshita. This episode today, we honor the woman that has done so much for the community, and we bring her again into her last possible episode here with June as she goes into retirement time of her life, changing the course of her direction of her path and what she decides to do moving forward. That's the spotlight of today's episode. If you want to get in touch with me, FSHD radio at fshdsociety.org is the email. Want to hear from you? What should we be talking about? Do you want to spread your story with us and share it? Today we talk about that, how important storytelling is in our community, how important it is to get the word out. The FSHD Society has evolved, it's changed, it has grown. The volunteers have just absolutely driven this machine, and the staff there has grown as well, driving more force forward. June Kinoshita has been one of the original, I guess, people within that office. She talks today in the episode about the early days. It was just 3 people in that office to evolve to what it is now, the different roles she's had. The way that she has joined her skills of journalism, science, communication together and kind of done so much within the society. She talks about certain pinpoints in the path of the growth, if not just within her career of the FSHD Society, but the growth of it as well, and certain changes and transactions that have happened. Talks about how Mark Stone, when he came in involved, and how she thought to herself as she was proposed the idea of being in that role, but then thought, wait, what's better for the community? She talks a lot about that we before me mindset, selflessness. I do ask her a tough question because she's that type of person that doesn't think of herself first. She thinks of others, about what kind of legacy or what would people remember about her in the FSHD Society. Tough question for her to answer. She answered it very well, of course. And of course, she deflected it, as she always does so well, to others that helped her get to where she is and what she's done. She talks about her new path forward and the certain nonprofits she's going to continue to work with that she started up, that she gets to devote more attention to. No surprise, she keeps moving forward. The advice she gives a lot is, to me, is she talks about don't forget what you're doing, who you're doing it for. She uses the term serving others, servant leadership. We have so many volunteers and staff that are those types of people. They're servant leaders. They lead by serving. The advice of keep telling the story is really poignant to me. This is a human disease, June will say. This doesn't affect the animals. It affects humans. We have to keep that in mind as we push forward to treatments. Definitely a cure. And she also touches on the fact that she believes the future is bright. And granted, we've heard that a lot, and people are still impatient, and we're waiting, and we need it. We need it now. And I get it. We're still pushing forward, as June has done so much with the FSHD Society and our community. She is known very well. I asked her too, even about her earlier roles when she was that point person for emails and calls and so forth, sharing some of those personal stories of people she would connect with, and how realizing, yes, this is definitely a human disease, that we cannot lose sight of the human element to it, and the voice of the patient we touch on, and having that evolve, and even naming it correctly to be more impactful. So this conversation was just fantastic. It was a little sad in a way for me because episode 1 was with June. The person that reached back out to me when I wanted to start the podcast was June. And then now to sit, and most likely could be the last interview with her in this platform, was a little sad, but fun. Enjoyable as always. Just a great person to talk with and to share stories with. So I hope you enjoy this episode here with June Kinoshita. Enjoy it. And yeah, nostalgic to say the least. Hi, everyone. I've got some exciting news for you from the FSHD community. If you've ever felt the unpredictability of FSHD or wish there was more accurate research and information out there, and I know you have, then listen up. I'm thrilled to tell you about Better Life FSHD, a groundbreaking new research platform from the FSHD Society that's changing the game for those of us living with FSHD. Better Life is your one-stop hub for tracking symptoms, accessing personalized resources like articles and videos relevant to you. And the best part, as you take surveys and track your symptoms, you provide FSHD researchers with better data to understand this complex, understudied disease. And a better understanding can lead to faster treatments, something every one of us can get behind. So head over to betterlifefshd.org and join the study. It only takes a minute to get signed up. Together, we can change the future for everyone affected by FSHD. I've done this. It's a simple process. I challenge you to do the same. Again, that's betterlifefshd.org. Now let's get back to the show. Welcome. This is the interview of interviews that we have. As we said before, hit record. Maybe this is like a bookend to some degree. We have June Kinoshita here. Everyone knows her for the FSHD Society and FSHD Community. Been here a long time. We are celebrating a career, granted not ending yet, but we're definitely at a touch point where we're closer to the retirement date than when you first started, right, June? I mean, we're walking that direction. Yeah. And you were episode 1 in this crazy project called the FSHD podcast back when it was called FSHD Society Radio. We used Blog Talk Radio. You remember that? And
yes, I do.
Things were live even sometimes, and the evolution of kind of how this has gone. And for me, that all started with an email to the society, and you were the person that answered back, and then so it went. Seemed like you were always the pioneer type spirit in my mind, where you were willing to kind of go different directions, kind of get the word out. And so I'm honored to have you on again, and all the things you've done for the community, for the FSHD Society, your involvement. So we're definitely spotlighting you, right? So it's okay, June, to be a little selfish here. You're not normally, right? You're always about the group, but we want to know more about you and where did this all start? Some know you, they know where you are maybe at this point of your career, and some may have known you the whole way through. But others, kind of want to maybe go back to the Wayback Machine. What was that first interaction with the society like back then?
Well, I mean, it was really serendipitous. I mean, I had been working as a science journalist, and then I got involved with a large philanthropy that was involved in the Alzheimer's disease space. And I founded a nonprofit called the Alzheimer Research Forum, which it still exists. It's altsforum.org if anyone's curious. And it is a kind of a news center for all research in the Alzheimer field. And it's a community. The top thinkers in the field exchange ideas. It's very lively. And so I wanted to, I guess, use web technology to kind of transform the research world, to get people to communicate better, communicate faster, all, to try to accelerate, towards a treatment. And Alzheimer's actually still pretty far from what I think is a real effective treatments. But it was a great background to have, total immersion in, the whole research to, bench to bedside world. And with that background, I think a headhunter contacted me, and the society was looking for a new executive director. And at that time, it was really tiny. The founder, Dan Perez,
Hmm.
and an office manager, Doris, who's was wonderful. And so, I didn't know anything about FSHD, but of
Mm.
course I looked it up right away, came across a New York Times article from 2010 about this is,
Mm.
one of the genome's greatest hits. And I read the science paper and I thought, wow, this is the best drug target I've ever heard of,
Mm.
as DUX4 doesn't seem to really have a vital function in adults. So you
Yeah.
could knock it down. There are lots of ways to knock down genes like that. And but you're not going to have a side effect. Like in knocking it down, you're not going to, kill the person, right? Or
Right.
cause some
Right. Or something
major,
drastic. Yeah.
I mean, there might be some, it's not like it's totally not doing something in the adult, but it's, generally the whole reason the disease occurs is because the, you know, our cells, our genetic mechanisms have a whole process to keep it shut down. Like it does, you don't want to turn it on, and that mechanism breaks down in various ways to lead to FSHD. Um, so
Right.
I
It's
thought
meant to be shut down, right? I
it's
mean,
meant to be quiet,
naturally.
shut
Yeah.
down. Um, so I just, at that point, I'd already been working in the Alzheimer field. I don't know, my gosh, about 15, maybe call it 20 years.
Oh
Anyway,
wow.
it
Yeah.
was like
Yeah.
at this point, I would love to really help get a treatment across the finish line, really,
Hmm.
really get it into patients. And I felt that with FSHD, there was a chance, that we could do that. But I also knew there were big challenges. I mean, as an organization, we had to transform from just having investigators say, here's a scientific idea, and we want you to fund it. And we raise funding, and that's kind of it.
Hmm.
I felt like we needed to educate and then mobilize patient communities on a much bigger scale, because this is a human disease. Like other, mice don't really get it.
Hmm.
Even,
Hmm.
other, laboratory animals don't normally get FSHD. You have to genetically engineer them to mimic
Yeah.
FSHD. So
Mm.
uh, it's not like, you give you know, a virus to a mouse and it dies and then you develop a treatment and the mouse lives. It's much more complicated. You need a mouse that does something like FSHD. And anyway, that,
Yeah.
they're imperfect models, but so you really need people to step up in a large way, allow, volunteer for studies, volunteer for natural history studies, and I was hearing a lot of people saying, well, I might volunteer for research
Hmm.
if there's a clinical trial. And
Hmm.
I would explain, like there will never be a clinical trial if you don't get
Do the
involved
research part.
sooner,
Yeah.
and donate some
Yeah.
blood and
Yep.
participate in genetic studies and natural history studies. So I think there's been a steady drumbeat. I know everybody's heard it from us. That was not, and that was because I was hearing, these, understandable points of view. And I'm going like, okay, we have a lot of work to do to
Hmm.
help people
Yeah.
understand. And and along with that, this is a rare disease, and no one research center is going to have enough patients for a natural history study, much less a future clinical trial. So very early on, I kind of I heard about a conference, a workshop where people were going to, I wasn't even sure what they were going to talk about, but it was
Yeah.
on FSHD. And this guy, Chip Wilson, who at that time
Mm.
was not out in public with his FSHD, was kind of the driving force behind it. And so I thought, well, I want to be there,
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
what they're talking about. And
I
I
like that.
called Robbie Tawil, and it just goes to show like the shift in the whole ecosystem. Like he wasn't excluding the society on purpose. It just didn't occur to him that a
Hmm.
patient advocacy organization should be at the table to talk about how we're going to, accelerate
Yeah.
research. So, we were involved with putting together the first, plans for putting together
Mhm.
what became the Clinical Trial Research Network. And then the society stepped in at some critical points when there was not enough funding to fund a second workshop and then to launch the trial network. So, and I'm very proud of the society that we were able to do that, and a couple of key funders.
Mhm.
When I
Yeah.
said, well, if we could get this going, would you step in with a large gift? And they were willing to do that. So, and that just, I think that was a game changer, because what it did was it created this network, even though it had at the time a modest, $120,000 or something to get it going. Within a year, they received millions of dollars in grants from the NIH and the Muscular Dystrophy Association.
Mm.
So a lot of what happens in science is these big organizations won't fund something until it exists. So how do you
How do you
create
get it to
a
exist?
little
Yeah.
piece of grit to get the pearl to grow? But you can't get the pearl without the grit. So we are the grit that goes in there.
That's a good way to put it.
Irritant
Yeah.
in the oyster.
It, so it's like, it seems like too, with all the things you talked about, right? You mentioned the journalism, the science side, the communications, those are all within your skill set. And yet you combine them all to build that connection community, talk about the connections between Chip and Robbie and so forth, and um, creating the CTRN and like getting the funding to grow it and grow it and grow it. Did it just feel like one thing just led to another, led to another? It's like a natural path going forward to know what to kind of do next. I mean, you're from a person outside looking in, I mean, you're really navigating a path like in the dark, like no one's really done it before. So did you find it difficult to know like what direction to go throughout this?
Um, it actually wasn't as random as that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think these are, I mean, in the broader world of drug development and things like that, I think people understand the importance of these things. So I think, it was always like part of like, if I want to get here, what are the steps to get there? So
Yeah.
uh,
Hmm.
it was in there, but I think these were new ideas within the society and within the board. So there was a lot of um, really advocating to the board why this needed to be done and why we needed to take these steps
Mm-hmm.
that we did.
What were some of the moments that kind of stood out? Like I always say, I even talk about like my children's young path, like especially my oldest through this baseball journey that he's on, for instance, where I can see exactly certain pinpoint spots where it changed or someone that intervened and then it shifted again into these positive directions. And then you can look back at your path and go, oh, I can see exactly now that these connections, these interactions, these people were definite pivotal points in the journey to get it to where we are. So you look back, do you can you remember any significant, like almost see it as like a map, right? Where you want to put the little pin pokes in there and go, this is where if this was a significant point and so on.
Oh, wow. It's hard to say because in a way, in a lot of ways, it feels like turning the Titanic. So you can't say like there
Yeah.
was a particular point where the Titanic turned. It's like you just have to keep paddling and pushing and not give up, I guess. But there were a few things like in terms of like trying to shift the culture or the mindset within the society. And I think, and this is not to be critical or anything at all. I mean, the society and Dan Perez were absolutely amazing. I mean, I truly was standing on the shoulder of giants who
Mhm.
got the society as far as it did from absolutely nothing, like two patients getting together saying, we got to do something, to having funded the research and having this enormous, this genetic, breakthrough and so on. That was just a Herculean effort. Um,
Mm.
but, um, but then, then you have to evolve. You have to shift and adapt to
Right.
the new challenges of the times. And I think there was a bit of a fear that that if you bring the patients together with the researchers, that the patients were going to either ask questions that the scientists didn't want to answer, like, they were either non-scientific questions or they were demands that were not reasonable because patients wouldn't understand how science works, or whatever it was. The two communities were kept very far apart. Like the meetings, the research conference was scientists only. Dan was the only patient who attended because he ran the whole
Yeah,
thing.
I ran it. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then there was a patient education conference where, you had speakers come in, but you didn't really have the communities really meeting. And I felt that it was really important for the communities to really meet and know each other and have relationships.
Yeah,
And that
you
we
didn't
should
want them in silos, right? You wanted them.
did not want them in, I
Yeah.
didn't want them in silos. First of all, I met a lot of people with FSHD who were scientists, who
Mm-hmm.
were perfectly able to, sit through the scientific meeting and really contribute to it and bring an additional perspective because they had lived experience with FSHD. And I felt that those members of the community would help hold the scientific community, I would say accountable, not that they were like doing something nefarious, but just to give them a greater sense of urgency.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just an academic, scientific issue, that there were, lives at stake. And also that people living with FSHD had a tremendous amount of insight to bring. As people start to talk about treatments, you go like, well, if you develop that treatment, like, no patient would want to take it because it would require them to do X or Y or take this
Right.
risk, so, or conversely, like the scientists might say, well, we can't do an experiment that asks people to give a biopsy because they don't want to. And I said, well, don't presume, ask the patients if
Mm-hmm.
they're willing,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's
willing
not
to,
great, but some will be like, I got to do what you got to do.
like they're willing to do it. Right. So I think the first meeting where in Boston in 2016, we had the patient connect
Mm-hmm.
and the IRC back to back with a banquet in the middle that was like a big everybody coming together. And it was the first big event. I think that Fulcrum Therapeutics was there.
Okay.
So also bringing industry into the picture. So that felt like a big shift
Yeah.
in, the community, I'd say.
Was like Fulcrum one of the bigger players then to start with as like a pharmaceutical to get involved? Is that
It
why it was
was,
pivotal?
there were two, Acceleron and Fulcrum,
Mm-hmm.
and Acceleron was slightly ahead, and, they did their phase 2 trial, I think, like pre-pandemic,
Yeah.
2017,
Yeah.
2018,
Yeah.
that kind of, and before that, there was a trial with, I think, I'm trying to think of it as Wyeth,
Mm.
and but I wasn't around at that time, but the other shift too, that was the first year we said, people should, the research congress was free up until then. And I think part of that was maybe because it came out of a workshop and you don't usually charge a registration fee to attend a workshop, but also I think a sense that you don't want to you don't want a barrier to keep researchers from coming to the meeting. And I can understand that feeling, um, but, at the time we said, this is the preeminent research congress for FSHD. People will want to be there and they will be willing to pay, at least help defray the cost of the Congress,
Right. Right.
and that the industry people would pay a higher rate. This is customary, and,
Mm-hmm.
and help subsidize the meeting.
Right.
So so that was the first year we did that. And it, helped, I mean, contributed significant
Oh
revenue,
yeah.
made it, and it's grown ever since in terms of,
Yeah. And how many now is there been those events?
the research congresses every year. So this
Mhm.
is probably this is probably, this year was the 10th that we've had since we started charging registration and so on. And it was in Europe, it was in Amsterdam, and it was the biggest one ever. So when I started, I think about 50 or 60 people attended.
Oh, yeah.
And this year in Amsterdam, over like 240 people
Wow.
attended.
That's a lot of growth in
Yeah,
10 years. Yeah.
yeah. And the other big inflection point was in 2019, we had the first research congress in Europe.
Mm.
And that was also part of this kind of sense that, the research world is international. And in fact, many of our grants were going to European researchers because they have very strong centers for
Yeah.
FSHD research. And and it was hard for people from Europe to come to the US every year. It seemed like we should,
Go
alternate.
there. Yeah.
And actually, the younger researchers, they have no travel funds, so they can't come to the US. In Europe, it's very inexpensive to get around, and they come.
Mhm.
You want that. You want them to be part of the community. You want them to
Right.
feel their work is supported. You want them to be able to network and develop their careers and all that. So, it was felt like a big leap. It was sort of a fantasy in the back of
Mhm.
my mind, like, would we ever be able to do that? And would the board support going more international this way? And then
Mm.
just serendipitously, a French researcher emailed me and said, we were thinking, it's hard for Europeans to go to the US, and we thought we should do a
Yeah. Cool story.
conference in Europe, but we don't want to we don't want it to conflict with yours. So we wanted to
Mhm.
discuss that. And I think that was all their intent, was just didn't want the calendar, to
Yeah.
conflict.
Right.
And on the call there, I said, how would you feel if we joined, we collaborated and did the
Yeah.
European meeting
Just did it together.
together? And she wasn't expecting that at all. And she was thrilled, and she
Yeah.
was like a great place to, she was in Marseille in France, and we had this amazing, the university owned this
Uh,
beautiful
wow.
palace on
Gosh.
right on
Wow.
the Mediterranean that was also
Yeah.
very inexpensive. And so we had like our first European meeting there, and that was a big shift, because there we became not just international
Mhm.
in word, but in action,
In action. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You brought the world together, all the community
That was our first World
involvement.
FSHD
Yeah.
Alliance meeting as well. I mean, there've been a precursor to that where the funders, there's some, the Global Foundation in Australia and the Stichting
Mhm.
in the Netherlands, Chris Carino and Friends of FSH. There were funding organizations that had formed a little, what we'll call ourselves FSHD champions. But we
Mhm.
were focused on, like, let's coordinate our funding. Let's find out what we're all funding and how much, and
Yeah.
what should we focus on. And it kind of lost steam, because once we'd done these surveys and had an idea, like, well, what do we do next? And then there were some attempts to get people behind like a registry initiative, and some of the
Mhm.
groups like kind of lost interest. And
Yeah.
so kind of went into hiatus. And then Mark is the one who, he had come on board as the CEO,
Mhm.
and said, well, let's form an alliance of patient advocacy groups.
Mhm.
And so that's the first FSHD Alliance meeting we had in 2019. But by that time, so people probably know, like, when we were like a 3-person organization, I
Yeah.
answered every call from every patient, answered every
Yeah.
email. I continued to do that for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And it's one of the, it's time intensive and
Hmm. Oh yeah,
but it was
absolutely.
so, so important. I mean, you don't know what you don't know until you talk to people,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Right.
And I think, especially in a rare condition, I hope the society always has people who do that and talk directly
Yeah. A
to
human
people,
voice, right?
human voice, and you learn, amazing things.
Mhm.
I'll tell you when you find out about the incredible talent and, I mean, anyway,
Yeah. Now you bring a actually a nice segue there to a question I wanted to ask when you were talking about early on. You're right, answering those calls, answering those emails, having that personal connection. Is there any like story that can pop into your head that was that kind of impacted you, maybe more than another, or maybe there's more than one? If it's maybe a patient's story or something of that nature, like within, especially even those earlier years, right? I mean, didn't know a lot about FSHD, then you started to hear from people directly.
yeah. Well, there's one I remember like within like a couple months of my coming onto the society. It was the end of the year,
Hmm.
and the end of the year, you call all of the, every person who's donated to the
Yeah.
society or like major donors and ask for more support. And so I was
Hmm.
just going through a list and I called someone. I got this woman on the phone and she told me she was very angry when she picked up the phone and heard who we were. And
Yeah.
she said she's on her way to visit the gravesite of her son who had died of FSHD. And he had died very young, like, maybe 10 years old or,
Yeah.
and I learned later, that the family they had been donors and they were actually at one of the patient conferences when their son died and they left. And that was, and that certainly left an impression. I mean, I just, you know, obviously felt a tremendous compassion for her, but also just the urgency of really our lives
Hmm.
on the line, especially, for the very more severely affected,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Absolutely.
and that we can't forget them. But it's also kind of to counterbalance on the other side of that. I also got a really angry call, I think, or an email from a woman who read on our site that every muscle in the body can be affected. Not that it will
Yeah.
be, every
Yeah.
muscle is vulnerable.
Yeah.
And she said, how can you say that? If I had read that when I was diagnosed as a teenager, I would have
Mhm.
killed myself. That's what she said.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so, I said, okay, how do we message, accurate information
Yeah.
without, on the one hand, without driving someone into despair.
Right. Yeah. You don't want the
On the
whole
other
doom and
hand, not
gloom, but you want to
underplaying
be real.
how, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's still a very fine,
Mm.
um, but I think what I try to tell people is for most people, it's a slower progressing condition. And the more you know about it and how to manage it, that can make a dramatic difference. When a doctor says that there's no treatment, that's really not true. That, they're sending the message, there's nothing you can do, and that's just
Yeah.
wrong. There's a lot
Right.
you can do.
Right.
Um, and at the same time, to recognize that for some, it's a very severe condition and a life-shortening condition. And that I'm hoping that the community as a whole can come around like it is all the same condition, and that we should, work together and
Mhm.
try to ameliorate the
Yeah.
harms, whether it's a shortened lifespan or if it's on an ongoing progressive disability that, you know, we should be able to kind of take all of that in and
Yeah.
unite to, you know,
Yeah, to do something
yeah.
about it. So is that like maybe like the biggest change in the diagnosis? You know, it was early on, like don't do anything, you know, be stagnant more or less, watch your movements, weights, all that kind of stuff. Doctors are telling us. And then now it seems like the diagnosis for the most part I'm hearing changes a little bit. Have you seen an evolution of that, of a change and from what the doctor tells a patient then to what they're currently giving them in news now?
I hope so.
Yeah.
And I think from what I see people like posting about or what talking
Hmm.
about, I feel like that message is
Hmm.
getting through, but it's getting through to people who are paying attention. I mean, those are the ones I hear from. I worry about the ones we never hear from. They're not on social media and they've kind of, you know, and I know they're out there because every now and then I hear from them going like, I'm
Yeah.
now 70 and I wish I had gotten more involved when I was 30,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
It's a little bit of that regret, right? That but
Well, we're told there's nothing to be done, and they
yeah.
weren't. There was an advocacy organization, and they're not constantly searching online to see what's out there. You know, they kind of
Mhm.
are carrying on, and all of a sudden one day they're like, and this has gotten to a point like I need to do something, and they look and they go like, oh my gosh, you know, there's this all of this stuff out there I didn't know
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
So
Then it's like getting probably hit with a fire hose of information that you didn't know e- existed. Speaking of the community, you know, you've talked about working with Alzheimer's as well, but what kind of in your own words makes this FSHD community different or unique?
oh, I mean, it's just the most amazing community. Um, so to just, you know, one of the things that makes it different from Alzheimer's, of
Hmm.
course, is that people generally, you know, you're not impacted cognitively. So people are have a lot of
Right.
self-awareness, and you know, and very capable. I mean, people, you know, I like to say people with FSHD are the, you know, masters of adaptation. I mean, they figure out ways to get around whatever issue comes
Yeah.
up. They're very creative, they're very resilient, and just so many really determined people. And really, I guess the thing is, I feel like people in the community are true partners, and we wanted to,
Mm.
you know,
Mm.
me, that was so important, you know, and I thought it was really important. You know, we have people who are employed by the society, but we're all
Mm.
part of a community that only by acting together with kind of a unified sense of purpose. I mean, people have different
Yeah.
ways that they can contribute or express it, or different aspects that they care more about, but that we can all um, work together is, and that to see that really happen and to see people take in the messages and spread it and
Hmm. Yeah.
become, you know, teach others and so on. That's just been amazing.
Mm.
And that it, it was just a real privilege to be able to work with this type of community. Um, and it's going to make a big difference. It's going to be why there's going to be a treatment in the, you know, really soon, I hope, you know,
Yeah.
that, you know, because in Alzheimer's, I mean, people have been working for 40 years with billions and billions of dollars, but they don't have, there's not the same level of, you know, obviously people, family members and so on, try to enroll their people, or people who are, you know,
Yeah.
it's not like
It's a different
totally
way.
lack of agency, but
Yeah.
it's really different. Um,
It's almost there's like a separation here, right? When you compare one to the other, and then the driving force is seems to be the patient involvement for FSHD, which has always seemed to be remarkable to me. I don't know about other rare diseases if that's a common thing, you know, that the patient is that involved. Do you find it to be more common in a rare disease such as FSHD, where the patients get, you know, almost hyper involved if they can? I'm not saying every patient does that, but it
Oh,
seems like a
but
lot of them.
yeah, well, it could be because I think they also sense that, if it's not them, who else? I
Mhm.
mean,
Right, right.
if it's a really common condition like diabetes or something, like, well,
Yeah,
somebody else will step in and do
right.
this,
Yeah. Someone else has got it. But if I don't do it, this is rare. And I don't know how rare our disease really is. I mean, there's like you mentioned too, like there's people that maybe haven't reached out or we don't know. We haven't turned every stone. Are they willing to come out to say something? Some people want to not talk about that they have FSHD, kind of put it on the wayside until for whatever reason they feel compelled to then come out, so to speak, to say they have FSHD. Um, when I was at the volunteer summit in the winter there was a part called like storytelling.
yeah.
And I thought that was very interesting. That was one I signed up for, and I enjoyed that part only because I feel like that's a little bit of kind of what I try to do. I try to pull people's stories out of them to share them. How impactful is that for people to do that, to tell that story?
Oh, it's so powerful. I mean, we are a species that is geared to respond to stories,
Mm-hmm.
right? So,
Yeah.
I was in Amsterdam a few weeks ago, and a bunch of us went to the Anne Frank house.
Mm.
And of course, we've all, most of us hope have studied or learned about the Holocaust through
Yep.
history books and so on. And you hear the data and how many millions of people were killed and, how many rounded up and so on. But I think the reason the Anne Frank house and Anne Frank's story has so much resonance, it's
Mm-hmm.
just one teenage girl's story, but the data can numb you, but you can relate
Ah,
to
yeah.
that one person's story, and then, in your mind, then it magnifies like there were thousands and thousands of Anne Franks,
Mm-hmm.
it just hits you in a different way. I think it's
Does.
just the way we process information. So telling those stories is really, really important. It makes it personal, makes it relatable, um, brings it home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it goes beyond then, like you mentioned, the data, which can numb you. I like that. That's a great way to say that. Get beyond the numbers, or even for the science side, like right, get past the cells, get past the it's just DNA and the scientific side of it. And I know that there's been a lot of groups that have been a part of the FSHD community, if it's pharmaceuticals and so forth. I think they've done a great job in trying to incorporate the human element into their work, so the researchers know why are they researching, what are they trying to do. This is not just petri dishes and so forth. This is like people. This is impacting lives.
It's interesting. They really want to connect with
Mm-hmm.
people with living with FSHD, and they'll bring all their employees together to meet a family or meet, someone living with FSHD. And they do that because they recognize how motivating that is.
Mm-hmm.
They're not, they're struggling day after day trying to get an experiment to work, or wrestling with numbers, or getting, wrestling with the
Right.
regulatory agency. But if they have one person's story that they can carry in their heart and saying, I'm doing it you know, for Carden, I'm doing it for Amy,
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing it for
Mm-hmm.
Tim, it
Yeah.
makes a
Yeah.
big difference.
It does. I think well, even when you did the voice of the patient,
Mhm.
right, with that, with working with FDA to kind of make sure our voice was being heard. Um, is that was that pioneering a little bit too? I mean, were there other communities within different disease structures that were doing the same thing, creating their voice to present, or is that something that was more, like I said, pioneering, brand new concept?
It wasn't a brand new concept. I mean, the FDA had created this mechanism, which
Mm-hmm.
was called the Patient-Focused Drug Development Meeting. All right, right, doesn't really resonate.
No, it sounds like
Like,
what?
what the heck
Yeah,
is that, right?
right, right.
Uh,
Doesn't sound warm and
and
fuzzy. Yeah.
you have to apply for that, and then they said, they have a limited number, but we did what's called an externally led, so we could sort
Mm.
of orchestrate it and invite, and several dozen FDA people came to that.
Yeah.
But we worked closely with a man named James Valentine, who had started this program within the FDA, and then had a consulting practice where we worked with a lot of
Okay. Yeah.
patient advocacy organizations to hold their own PFDDs, as they were called.
Mhm.
So I think so there was a path, but I feel like we broke some new ground in that. I think first of all, we rebranded it for our community. I said nobody knows what a PFDD is, and I can't even,
Right.
you resort to using an acronym that's even more opaque, and it doesn't, and what
Yeah.
it is it's about the voice of the patient. We're going to call it the voice of the patient,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah,
know.
it humanizes it, doesn't it? When you say
Yeah,
that, you know exactly what you're trying to accomplish and
yeah,
what you're trying to bring to the FDA
yeah.
when you say it like
I
that.
I always believe, be direct. Say what you mean. Say what it is.
Yes. Yes. I like
Um,
that.
and I think it certainly helped us in, because people, when we started people letting the community know we're going to have this and we want and need you to be involved,
Mhm.
people responded in droves, right away. It kind of resonated
Yeah.
with them. So, and I think we had, I think the whole thing was like produced really beautifully. I think, I was involved in choosing who was going to be involved. They wanted like a limited number of people who could give
Mhm.
5 testimonies. So, and that's what, if you know the community, you can kind of say, okay, this person will give a really good story about this part of it, and somebody else will address something else.
Mhm.
And we also want age diversity, we want ethnic diversity, all
Yeah.
that. So,
So you know it. Yeah. It's affecting anybody and everybody, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Good representation. Um, you've worn a lot of hats, different roles within the FSHD Society. I'm sure those came with challenges. What do you think has been some of the biggest or the biggest challenge?
Um, well, I would say so I started out as the executive director, but working alongside the CEO who was the founder.
Hmm.
So, and I was kind of new to that level of like being involved in sort of um, managing a small nonprofit.
Yeah.
So just there's a ton to learn. There are a lot of regulations and things that restrict what you can do, like especially in the area of fundraising. Like I learned
Mhm.
so much about an auction sounds like a good idea until you find out
Yeah.
all the bureaucratic paperwork involved.
You're like, wait a minute. This is not this. Yeah. This is harder than I thought. Yeah.
Or a raffle is considered a form
Uh-huh.
of gambling, and that takes you into a whole nother, it's
Oh
just
my gosh. Yes. Yes. Yep.
and then the financial accounting that's going on. So,
Mhm.
but it was invaluable. I mean, it was really, and I think it's important for people to know. I mean, in the majority of nonprofits, I would say not all, like some of them flagrantly violate all these things
Mhm.
but to get to be well rated, I mean, it's so important. People need to know that there's accountability and transparency. And so, learning those ropes was not always easy. You get your
Yeah.
hands slapped a lot, you just unknowingly wander into something like you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
And then as the organization grew, um, I was offered the opportunity to kind of step into more of the CEO role. And
Mhm.
I thought about it a lot. I actually did some, had some sessions with executive coaches. I was like thinking about what that would mean and how that would align with
Mhm.
who I am and what I felt like I could best contribute. And I realized about myself, like I really like, I mean, I guess I know what I'm good at.
Yeah.
And I have no ego tied up in like doing things I know I can do, I'm competent to do, but I'm not going to enjoy it. And I would have myself hire someone else who's really good
Mm.
at it and thrives and experienced, like
Yeah.
there were a lot of aspects to being a CEO that I was like, yes, I could say for the greater good, but I just felt like there are parts of doing that that are not going to draw on my best strengths, and
Ah,
you know,
yeah.
so and I think the board found an amazing person in Mark Stone who
Mhm.
had the experience running another organization
Mhm.
and how to grow, so and we partnered, we worked incredibly closely together to kind of figure out like that next growth strategy,
Mhm.
and so and I felt like, yeah, I mean, I don't see that as a challenge. I think it's a growth moment of understanding
Yeah,
yourself and what
I
you
agree.
you know
Yeah,
um
but still a challenge nonetheless. Meaning, I'm sure you felt compelled to try to be in that role, but yet you wanted to do what was best. Sounds like for the community, for the FSHD Society, for yourself, making sure the skills and tools you bring to the table were being used the best way possible.
yeah, yeah,
It's
totally.
really humbling, to be honest with you. To be like, hey, I'm going to be this, title. It's like, wait a minute, that sounds cool, but is that
Yeah.
really what I can do best to help this group? And it seems like that's always how you've done this. You've always seemed to put the community first. Like you always thought, I think from my perspective of how long I've known you within this, you always came across as the person that always did best for the community. But what can I do to do best for the community? A definite like a we before me, all-star in my opinion, and then the go-to person. And and to be in it that long and to do all the things you've done and help make things shift certain courses, certain directions. And I know it'll still move forward, even if you're not as involved and then slowly not. But you've made a massive impact. There's no doubt about it. And I'm sure you feel that. So I guess leading to the question is like, what do you hope people maybe remember about June Kinoshita and the FSHD Society? I know it's like a tough question to ask because of your personality, because you're kind of saying, I want them to remember this, right? And there's a little ego in it, but I think that's okay considering what you've done.
um I guess, I mean, I don't know, I mean, I guess what you're saying, I mean, for me, I mean, it's really important to always keep in mind what is the purpose,
Mm-hmm.
what you're serving, um, and it's always been, and I think it was a really intentional thing for me to go out and meet as many people as I could, because they are
Mm-hmm.
the people, you are all the people I'm serving. I need to know who
Mm-hmm.
you are. I need to have that bond. I have to feel that sense of, you know, personal obligation.
Yeah.
Um, and it's the most wonderful thing. I mean, people open up to me and let themselves be that
Yeah. Yeah.
person. So I hope that and I feel like you'll never go wrong in this kind of organization to always keep that in mind. That we're here to try to make your life better,
Yeah.
to with whatever, give you hope, give you tools to, give you community, support, all of that. And you know, always be an advocate.
Yeah.
And I guess what I hope is, you know, everybody else, carries that spirit forward.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great way to answer. I knew it was going to be tough. When I wrote down the question, I was like, "Ooh, this could be a tough one for June to answer because of the way your brain and your heart think." And so, thinking of that, like, right, what people want to remember June as, great answer. And then people are always going to say, "Well, June, what do you think? Where do you think the FSHD Society is going to be now? Maybe in another 5 or even 10 years, in your opinion, knowing what you know, and and all the work
Well,
you've
I
done.
sure hope that there will be FDA approved treatments on the market, and I will hope to be invited to the celebration when that happens.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So I'm sure of that. Yeah.
And that's just like the beginning of a whole next battle, like
Mhm.
to make sure people have access to it. Make sure people always also remember, like, the drug is just part of an arsenal. I mean,
Mhm.
you still need to, mind what you eat and
Yeah.
exercise and take care of your mental health and be in community, all of those things you're still going to need and want. Um, and that access to information and good healthcare are not
Mhm.
a given in this,
Yeah,
sadly.
that's the truth.
And even information, like, uh, people are struggling to get, power wheelchairs and get the medical
Mhm.
care they need. So this community has to be here to kind of help navigate, Anna,
Yeah, navigate it.
the navigator is going to be even more important. And we need to make sure, that the clinicians, the medical profession knows about
Mm.
FSHD, that and can serve people much more than they're serving them now. So, and then, we've become global. I get heartrending emails from people in, just recently, several women in Iran, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
and right before they started
Makes
getting
sense.
bombed, like,
Right.
they're all alone. And, I was saying, like, well, let's get, I looked in our database, we had like several dozen people from Iran,
Mm,
patients. They're
yeah,
not connected to each other. Like, okay, what a difference it might make for them to be
you get
connected.
connected. Yeah.
And actually a doctor there who trained in the Netherlands, who practices in Tehran, who, they should know about.
Mm,
And there's some real outstanding people of Iranian background who are doing work in FSHD.
mm.
Like, my God, suddenly blanking on his name, Tabir Bar Sharif. He's
Yeah.
invented this whole new AAV, and his company that he helped start, this company that's been acquired, I think
Mm.
I think it was Novartis. But anyway, his father still lives in Iran, and our, previous chief science officer, Jamshid Arjamand, is half Iranian and he speaks
Yep.
Farsi. So I said, let's get them together on a Zoom and they
Yeah.
can that
Yeah. Connect them.
phone,
Right.
and we can support them. Um, so there are, all over the world, there's still too many people with FSHD who are just suffering alone,
Yeah.
you know, and just to reach them all, that's a lifetime.
That is a lifetime. Yeah. That is a
Yeah,
lifetime project to make sure they all get connected somehow.
yeah.
That's like an endless role, right? There might not be an end to that, or a finish line. Um, Within, the things we've talked about, um, what is then in your horizon? What is your next phase? What do you? I mean, are we going to a cabin in the woods? Are we, touring the world? Like, what are you going to do with this all this extra free time? They would be
There
saying,
won't
right?
be much because I
Exactly.
I have um I have founded two nonprofits.
Oh my goodness, you're right into it still. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I've been sort of doing them on the side, but I'd like to be able to devote more time to them.
Mm-hmm.
So one is a nonprofit called newharmonyline.org, which has an amazing technology for making it possible to compose music without knowing
Oh,
instruments
nice.
or theory. It's just a touch, screen where
Yeah.
you uh, kind of draw notes and melodies and start to arrange them and play around with
Wow,
them. So
that sounds fascinating. Okay.
great educational mission. I'm very passionate about that because I think the arts are so
Mm-hmm.
central to being human, and to
Oh, yeah,
give people a way to express themselves through music is really, can
that's
be
important. Yeah.
helpful for people. So that's one. And then I started a newspaper in my city called the Waltham Times.
Hmm.
It's a profit newspaper, and that's because I'm going back to my journalism roots.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And local news is dying all over the
Yeah.
country, and I think it's
So is this like an actual paper like you hold?
one day I hope it will be. That's
Ah,
expensive
I
to
love it.
produce, but right now it's a digital
Yeah.
paper. And I have, we've gathered a group of, dozens of volunteers and raising funds, operating the paper.
Mhm.
We hire about a dozen freelancers. We have a volunteer editorial newsroom. We're trying to get to where we can
Nice.
hire a staff, editor and
Yeah.
so on. But we just launched it in February, and
Oh, it's new. It's young, right?
it's sort of
Yeah.
taken off like
Yeah.
way faster than I thought it would. So
Really?
yeah.
Yeah, I
So
think there's something about that. Even when you talk about, even you say the word newspaper, I get the sense of comfort, nostalgia a little bit. Like, yeah, you know what? I kind of miss that. I miss having a paper. Why can't I see a newspaper? You know,
yeah.
where did it go? Was
I
it really
remember
that unimportant?
it.
I mean,
I loved getting the paper every
yeah,
home from school, and you like to read like what's going on and
exactly.
what friends
Yeah.
are in there and so on. So right now it's digital, but people can go on and go like, okay. And then
Mhm.
people have said, wow, well, I know so much more about what's going on here than I ever did living
Ah,
here 20 years, and
yeah, yeah.
so like a central place that's like the public square.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, you know,
Totally.
why were the helicopters flying over the head the other day? And
Yeah.
that, big festival going on in
Yeah.
the town center, and why are our schools, struggling, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of, what's happening in the upcoming municipal elections.
Yeah.
It's all in there.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, and to have like true journalism backing it
Yeah,
is important. I mean, people can go on social media and like put their own opinions and stuff, but no, you want to have that like trusted source. What happened to the trusted local source, right?
yeah,
You kind of brought it up.
absolutely.
It's kind of went borderline extinct, and to have something like that resurgence come back in your community, and then since February you said it's grown, I think you're on the right path there.
Yeah.
What a surprise! Something June Kinoshita puts her mind to is going to start to take off. That's just so surprising, June.
I don't know.
So last question for you. If you had advice to give the FSHD leaders out there, even if it's the walk and roll leaders or the chapter director leaders or paid leadership, even doesn't matter. Leadership is leadership. Or even to the patients going forward within the community. What is June Kinoshita's key advice to give?
Wow, okay. Well, keep telling stories about
Mm-hmm.
yourself and about the people you meet and care about. Keep telling them, because every time you tell them, you'll get better at it.
Mm-hmm.
And, and don't don't give up.
I like that. Yeah.
I think persistence is really, really key. I mean, if you might feel like you're by yourself or this tiny community or people don't care, but you just keep at it, and look where the society has come from, just sheer doggedness.
Yeah. Right. Right. To the borderline community machine that it is, always still keeping the people as its compass north, but it's very robust now compared to the you said three people in the beginning starting, and look how many people are now involved, the large, vast numbers of volunteers and so forth. It's gotten pretty large. So it's quite a force
Yeah.
now, isn't it?
And I think the other thing I'll say, because I've seen this happen to the detriment of other patient advocacy or, disease organization groups, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
is that it sometimes is too easy for factions to develop, or people to start feuding about something
Oh,
or other.
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't do that. It's so destructive.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody can find a place, a niche, and work together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think
Correct. And put those niches together. I think that's
yeah,
fantastic. Final advice. Stop pulling against each other and start, pulling and pushing the same way. Let's all do it the same way.
yeah,
Yeah. Join it together. Well,
yeah.
thanks, June. This has been fantastic. I know we'll talk again, but it does feel like a little bit of, you, like you mentioned, kind of a bookend to it. Episodes, of course, will still carry on, but everyone needs to know, like, go now back to episode 1 and see how that all sounded.
Oh,
And if
gosh.
you, after you listen to this one, I don't know if I could do it. I have a hard time listening to myself again after we do these, but yeah, go to the Wayback Machine and listen to episode 1 with June. But thanks, June, for being here. Everything you've done to the community. Thank you is not enough. It's not a big enough word, but we
Thank you, Jim,
we
for being
appreciate it.
here to be one of the voices of the community. I mean, what you've done with your podcast and Straight Talk is just, I'm so proud of it and wonderful. Thank you for
Thank
that.
you. Thank you. Thanks, June.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
Take care.
You too. Take care. That is June Kinoshita. Legend comes to mind, someone that's been there right away, from the beginning. Seeing something that needed to be done, still talks about how she's involved with 2 more nonprofits, the local newspaper idea I'd love, newharmonyline.org, things that she's still involved with. And she's not going to be a stranger to the community or the FSHD society, but the fact that obviously people need to move on in certain stages of their life. She's given so much to the community, and that we're excited for her, whatever that next step is. I know I am. And from the very early idea of a podcast, for me, it was a source of educational. It still is. When I listen to podcasts, if I'm driving or if I'm cutting the grass or going for a walk, it's like that's my university time. Like that's the time where I want to expand my mind, hear other people's opinions and thoughts, and get educated on ideas that are not mine. And when I was first diagnosed, I looked for that. I starved for that. I just didn't see it. And then I did find the society. I didn't find a podcast tied to it. So I thought, well, let me make a connection. What the heck? I had some podcast experience prior, and with some decent success, some fun success. Nothing as serious or as purposely driven to help a community like this is. But I thought, people say I have this kind of borderline skill to kind of get stories from people or talk to them and gather information. And I thought that might help the community, maybe give somebody what I was looking for, that voice. And then now it's evolved into the patients. And June was the person that responded to that, talking about how they were thinking about some type of platform similar. And when I brought up with the email, it was good timing. It was good timing. And for me, in my roadmap of the path of FSHD, I could definitely stick a pin for sure and say that's kind of where my direction started to get involved, to start to bridge gaps between people and bring them together more. And of course, now podcasts have become extremely popular. Everybody would say, wait a minute, you don't have a podcast? And it got to that point where now it's just that common. When I started, it wasn't. When I started podcasting in general, it wasn't. There was, I would argue, say only maybe 100 or so way then. We're talking like 15 plus years ago, at least. And I've been honored to have that evolve to this, from episode 1 with June to this episode today that we had with her. Yeah. And thank you is not enough. Great takeaways though. And really for me, the one is like, keep telling your story. That advice June gave is spot on. And I hope I can help be that platform for you to tell your story. If you want to share it, send me an email, fshdradio@fshdsociety.org. This has been a lot of fun to have this episode. A little bit sad, I have to admit, which kind of like that feeling kind of snuck on me a little bit as we were, tying a ribbon to the end of that conversation with June, because it does feel like some type of end and then a new beginning, of course. So I want to hear more stories. Fuel the show, fuel the podcast. What else should we be talking about? What have we missed? Have we turned every stone? Have we talked about everything that needs to be talked about? I want to hear from you. FSHD Radio at FSHDsociety.org. You can follow me on social, follow the show everywhere. You can find it on Spotify, I think Google Podcasts, etc. Tell your friends, share it. Please share it outside of the FSHD community. I think the stories from people that are on this podcast can be inspiring to anybody, not just those with FSHD. I think in order for us to get more involvement and to get more support, we need to spread this beyond just the FSHD community and have it spread to the human community. I think it'll help us all even more. So thanks again for joining us. It's been a real fun episode. Thank you, June, as well, and FSHD Society's support of this podcast. I appreciate you all, and thanks for listening. This has been FSHD Straight Talk.